The road stretched endlessly ahead as I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the familiar hum of our old Subaru beneath me. My name's Sarah Bennett, and on that late spring evening, I should have known better than to trust my brother's warm invitation. 4 hours from our quiet Vermont town to the manicured streets of Ashford, Connecticut. 4 hours of my husband Mark humming along to 80s rock classics, our daughter Ellie curled up in the back seat with a dog-eared copy of Little Women, and our son Jamie asking every half hour, "Are we there yet?" His excitement about seeing Uncle Tom was like a shaken soda bottle, ready to pop. Mark was dressed in his usual mix of casual and worn-in, a soft chambray shirt from a local shop, khakis that had seen better days but fit him perfectly, and his scuffed brown loafers that he claimed were finally broken in right. His salt-and-pepper hair was tousled from the drive, and that easy smile of his, the one that made you believe the world was exactly as it should be, played on his lips. I'd chosen a simple cream silk blouse and navy trousers, pairing them with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Small, elegant, a reminder of steadiness in this whirlwind of a day. Ellie wore a vintage pink dress with delicate embroidery, a find from an estate sale that had the softness of a bygone era. Jamie was in his favorite blue polo and neatly pressed chinos, looking every bit the little gentleman, though the wrinkles were already betraying him the moment we pulled into the long, winding driveway just after 7 in the evening. The house rose before us like something out of a movie set, white columns gleaming under the fading sun, windows aglow with crystal chandeliers, and a lawn manicured to a fault. Luxury cars formed a semicircle around the grand entrance, sleek Jaguars, a Maserati gleaming like a jewel, and a Rolls-Royce that I'm pretty sure could buy a small cottage back home. Jamie pressed his face against the window, breath fogging the glass. "Uncle Tom lives here," he whispered. "He rents here," I corrected gently, though my stomach had already started tightening. Mark said nothing but narrowed his eyes slightly, taking in the scene with that quiet, calculating gaze he always had when observing people. Everyone assumed he was just noting things for his nature columns, but I knew better. Mark was always watching, always measuring. Our trusty Subaru suddenly felt like a rental car stuck in a showroom full of supercars. We parked between a gleaming Tesla and a sleek Aston Martin. The party spilled out across the terrace and sprawling lawn, women in designer gowns worth more than my car, men in tailored suits sharp enough to cut glass, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne, and that peculiar aroma of privilege, like breathing in a different kind of air. Ellie's hand found mine, her small palm clammy. She was 9 and perceptive enough to sense when she didn't quite belong, though she'd never say it aloud. "You look lovely, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing back a stray curl. She squeezed my hand, but her eyes were wary. A woman with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes intercepted us at the doorway. "Names, please." I gave mine. "Sarah Bennett. This is my husband, Mark. Our children, Ellie and Jamie." The woman scanned her list, her expression tightening just a fraction. "Ah, yes, Vermont family, right this way." Mark's hand settled lightly on my lower back as we followed her through the crowd. We passed the VIP section, a raised platform with the best view, the best lighting, cocktail tables draped in ivory linen. And there, in the center, stood Tom, my younger brother, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than our entire wardrobe. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I expected him to smile and wave us over, proud to introduce us to his fiancée's circle. But instead, I saw something I'd never seen before. Embarrassment. He glanced around at the glittering guests, then back at us in our modest clothes. He didn't move. The coordinator led us past the VIP area, past the bar, past the dance floor, and finally to a small round table tucked in the shadowed corner near the kitchen door, where the music was muffled, the lighting dimmer, and the view was of the service entrance. "This is your spot," the coordinator said with a forced cheeriness, already turning away. Mark pulled out a chair for me, his movements calm but deliberate. He helped Ellie settle in, then Jamie. When he finally sat beside me, his jaw clenched just enough to make me notice. "Why are we sitting by the kitchen?" Ellie asked quietly. "It's fine, love. We can see everything from here," I said brightly, though we both knew the truth. The seating wasn't an accident. It was a message. Across the terrace, Tom laughed, champagne flute raised, completely absorbed in his high society bubble. He didn't look our way again. Mark leaned back, fingers tapping once, twice on the tablecloth. To anyone watching, he looked relaxed, mildly interested, but I knew that look. I'd been married to him for 12 years. It was the look of a man taking notes, and Mark's notes always came with consequences. The party buzzed around us like a secret club we'd never been invited to join. Waiters skimmed past, their trays angled toward the VIP section. Laughter floated from the center of the terrace, where Tom and his fiancée, Heather, held court beneath strings of Edison bulbs that cast a golden glow. Our corner was lit by the harsh fluorescent spillover from the kitchen. Jamie kicked his feet under the table, still buzzing despite our exile. "When do we eat? I'm starving." "Soon, buddy," Mark said, ruffling his hair. He'd kept his easy demeanor since we sat down, but I noticed he'd angled his chair just so, to watch everything. "The writer's eye," people joked. If only they knew. As I glanced up, a shimmer of movement caught my eye. Heather floated toward us like a queen surveying her realm, her champagne-colored gown catching the light with every step, silky, sleek, and tailored to perfection, hugging curves that spoke of expensive gym memberships and personal trainers. Her blonde hair was swept back in a flawless chignon, and her makeup was so precise it looked like it had been painted on with a miniature brush. Around her neck sparkled a diamond necklace that probably cost more than our entire family's vacation fund. She stopped at our table with a smile that was all white teeth and no warmth. "Sarah," she said, her voice sweet as honey but sharp as a tack, "I'm so glad you made the journey all the way from Vermont. That must have been quite the trek." 4 hours, I said evenly, holding her gaze. "Not too bad." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Well, you're braver than me. I couldn't imagine living so far from civilization." She cast a glance around the party, as if to underscore the grandeur we'd left behind. "But I suppose that's the artistic lifestyle, isn't it? Tom told me you work for a nonprofit. That must be so fulfilling." The emphasis on fulfilling was like a slap disguised as a compliment. Mark's hand found mine under the table, his thumb brushing lightly, silent support. "It is," I said simply. Heather's gaze flicked over our children, lingering on Ellie's dress. "And this must be your daughter. What a sweet vintage dress, very quaint." Ellie's smile faltered, the edge of an insult hidden in the word quaint, slipping past her young, innocent mind. "It's Ralph Lauren," I said, voice steady but firm. "From the 80s. Better quality than most things made today." Heather's smile sharpened. "Oh, absolutely. Vintage can be charming. It's just that people here tend to prefer current collections, straight from the runway. But there's something to be said for making do with what you have. Very resourceful. Making do as if you were one step from the charity shop out of necessity, rather than choice." The words hung in the air like poison. A waiter appeared with a tray of canapes at the VIP section. Heather excused herself with a graceful wave and disappeared briefly. She returned moments later, ushering a small group of guests our way like a safari guide pointing out exotic animals. "Everyone, this is Sarah Bennett's brother, Tom's sister," Heather announced, her voice dripping with patronizing sweetness as her champagne flute traced circles in the air. "She lives secluded in Vermont to find artistic inspiration and works for a nonprofit, a life that's, well, quite chill, but surely a bit removed from our fast-paced world, isn't it?" The guests smiled politely, their eyes sliding over us with practiced disinterest, like we were museum exhibits that hadn't been dusted in a while. I could see the narrative Heather was spinning, the sister who couldn't hack it in the real world, who'd fled to the countryside to play rustic, and who now showed up at events like this as a reminder of what she'd left behind, or failed to achieve. Mark cleared his throat, breaking the silence for the first time since Heather arrived. Actually, Sarah manages complex projects with multiple stakeholders and seven-figure budgets. The nonprofit sector requires quite a bit of pace, just with less emphasis on profit margins. His tone was conversational, pleasant, but there was steel beneath it, the kind most people missed because Mark had perfected the art of seeming harmless. Heather's smile didn't falter. Of course nonprofits are so important, though I imagine the salary must be quite modest compared to the private sector. But that's the sacrifice one makes for passion, right? She swept away, her entourage following like ducklings. Jamie tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, I'm really hungry. Can I get one of those things they're carrying around?" The buffet was near the VIP zone, a dazzling spread of canapes, caviar, smoked salmon, and other tiny morsels that looked more like art than food. Jamie was already sliding out of his chair when Heather reappeared, as if drawn by his interest. "Oh, Jamie." She crouched down, her dress pooling around her like liquid gold. "I'm not sure those appetizers are quite right for you, sweetheart." "Why not?" Jamie asked, innocent and hopeful. "Well, foie gras and caviar are very acquired tastes. I'm afraid since you haven't had proper palate training, you might find them hard to swallow." She tilted her head, the picture of faux sympathy. "Tell you what, I'll have the kitchen make something friendlier for you. How about spaghetti or fried chicken? I'm sure you're more used to that at home." The implication was clear, even to a 9-year-old. Your family only eats fast food and simple fare. You don't belong here, literally or figuratively. Jamie looked confused but said, "I like trying new things." "No need, Heather," I said, standing up, placing a firm hand on Jamie's shoulder. My voice was quiet but unmistakably firm. "The children will sit here and eat with their parents. We teach our kids to experience everything. They don't need to be separated." Heather's smile cracked for the first time. "I was only trying to help." "We don't need help," I said, guiding Jamie back to his seat. Heather straightened, her expression cooling. She glanced at Mark, perhaps expecting him to contradict me or apologize for his wife's stubbornness. But Mark just smiled blandly, a smile that was pleasant, forgettable, utterly unreadable. "Suit yourself," Heather said finally, though she added with a sigh, "I'd hate for the children to be uncomfortable." She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment behind her. The table fell silent. Ellie picked at her napkin. Jamie's excitement had dimmed considerably. Across the terrace, Tom remained absorbed in his VIP bubble, laughing and toasting, completely unaware, or willfully ignorant, that his fiancée was treating his family like second-class citizens. Mark leaned toward Jamie. "Hey, buddy, want to know a secret?" Jamie nodded. "The best food at parties is always whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's caviar or chicken fingers. If it makes you happy, it's the best." Mark winked. "And between you and me," he added quietly, "I'd take a good burger over fish eggs any day." Jamie giggled, some of his sparkle returning. But I caught Mark's gaze tracking Heather across the terrace, his jaw tightening just slightly. My husband was many things, patient, observant, slow to anger, but protective above all. And someone had just insulted his children. I had a feeling Heather had no idea what she'd just stirred. The party was reaching its peak, laughter spilling over the terrace, music pulsing beneath the chatter. But my focus was on Ellie, who had excused herself to the ladies' room about 10 minutes ago. My heart was already tightening when I noticed her empty chair beside me. I scanned the crowd anxiously, searching for the familiar blonde head and that soft pink vintage cardigan I'd found at a dusty estate sale last year. Better quality than half the things Heather's crew was wearing, I reminded myself. Then I saw her, Ellie, walking back toward our shadowed corner. But something was wrong. Her shoulders were hunched as if she wanted to melt into the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, like she was trying to disappear. Even from this distance, I could see the redness around her eyes and the way she blinked too fast. She slid into her chair without meeting my gaze. "Ellie," I whispered, leaning closer, keeping my voice low. "Sweetheart, what happened?" She shook her head, jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. That's when I knew it was bad. Ellie rarely cried. She was like me, holding everything in until it all spilled over at once. "Sweetheart, talk to me." Her voice was strangled, barely above a whisper. "Can we just go home?" My heart shattered. "What happened?" I asked gently. "Some girls." She swallowed hard. "By the bathroom. They were maybe 12 or 13. They pointed at my shoes." I looked down at her feet, the soft taupe suede flats, classic silhouette, worn but well cared for. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Vermont because they were real quality. "The kind that lasts," I'd told Ellie proudly. Her voice cracked. "They said I was wearing poor person shoes, asked if I got them from a charity shop because they looked old." White-hot rage exploded inside me. My sensitive, brilliant 9-year-old, reading 3 grades above her level, volunteering at the animal shelter every weekend, mocked for her shoes. Before I could reach out to comfort her, the sharp click of heels on marble interrupted us. Heather appeared at our table, teeth flashing in a smile that was all predator, no prey. "Oh dear," she cooed, voice dripping with false concern. "Is everything all right?" Her tone was pitched just loud enough to draw attention. Heads turned, champagne glasses paused mid-sip. "We're fine," I said flatly. "Are you sure? Because Ellie looks upset." Heather tilted her head, a practiced mask of sympathy. "Did something happen?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Ellie beat me to it, voice small. "Some girls made fun of my shoes." Heather's eyes flicked down to Ellie's flats, and I caught that microsecond of satisfaction before her face rearranged itself into understanding. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, crouching to meet Ellie's eyes in a theatrical display of compassion. "You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are business leaders, philanthropists. These kids are being groomed for Yale, for Harvard. They have very refined standards." My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Heather continued, adopting a teacherly tone. "Honestly, Sarah, I've been worried about this. The children, they're not used to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Vermont without regular exposure to proper social settings." She sighed, shaking her head slowly. "It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations." The words hung like poison. She wasn't defending Ellie. She was defending the bullies. "Maybe next time," Heather said, rising gracefully and smoothing the fabric of her dress. "You could prepare them better. Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion. It would save everyone the awkwardness." The crowd was watching now. I could feel their eyes drilling into us, judging my children. Heather's implication was crystal clear. "This is your fault, Sarah. You brought your country bumpkin children to a place they don't belong. Dressed them like charity cases, and now everyone's uncomfortable." I was shaking, ready to scream, to tell her exactly what I thought about her and her refined standards, to drag her outside but I was frozen. Because Tom was here somewhere in this crowd, my brother, my only sibling. If I made a scene, if I caused chaos at his engagement party, I would be the villain in this story. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. Heather's smile widened. Victorious. She thought she'd won. Then Mark rose. The change was immediate and terrifying. Gone was the gentle, soft-spoken man who had spent dinner quietly eating pasta. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood to his full height, moving with controlled precision that made people instinctively step back. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, one hand adjusting the button of his tailored navy jacket, which fit him like a second skin. Silence spread outward like ripples on a still pond. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped clinking. Mark didn't look at Heather. He looked at me. His icy blue eyes were calm, cold, and completely focused. There was a question in them, one we'd asked each other 1,000 times in 17 years. "Have you had enough?" It was the same look he'd given me the day I told him about the harassment at my old job. The same look before he quietly made a phone call that resulted in my former boss being audited by the IRS. Mark didn't need to make threats. He didn't have to. I thought about Ellie's red eyes, about Jamie's confusion when he wasn't allowed a third canapé, about being exiled to the kitchen corner while Heather paraded around in a dress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I thought about my brother, who I'd driven 4 hours to celebrate, who hadn't once come to check on us. I looked at Mark and nodded. The decision was made. Mark's expression didn't waver as he reached down with infinite gentleness to help Ellie out of her chair, then did the same for Jamie. I gathered my courage, steadying my voice. "We're leaving," I said, the words clear and deliberate. A hush fell over the terrace. Nearby conversations stalled like a record needle stuck in a groove. Guests stopped mid-sip, eyes turning toward us, drawn by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Heather's triumphant smile faltered as she realized something had changed. Her eyes flickered between Mark and me, uncertainty creeping in where confidence had reigned moments ago. "My house," she said, voice dripping with possessiveness and challenge, projecting to the gathering crowd. "This is my house after all. Mine and Tom's." Her words landed like stones, territorial and absolute. She wasn't just dismissing us, she was evicting us from her domain, like trespassers who'd overstayed their welcome. I was gathering Ellie's small purse when I caught a flicker of something crossing Mark's face. Not anger, not indignation, but a smirk. It vanished almost instantly, so quick I thought I'd imagined it, but I knew Mark well enough to recognize that expression. I'd seen it only 3 times in our marriage. Once before he negotiated a hostile corporate takeover, once before he dismantled a rival company that tried to poach his entire executive team, and once when he outbid a Russian oligarch for a Manhattan penthouse. Just to prove a point, it was the look of a man who'd been handed exactly what he wanted. "Sarah," a voice called sharply through the murmur. Tom pushed his way through the guests, his face flushed, tie askew, hair tousled as if he'd been running on empty all night, the kind of exhaustion that sinks deep into your bones. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes darting between me and Heather. "Why are you all leaving already?" Heather immediately shifted, hand flying to her chest in a feigned gesture of wounded innocence. "Oh, Tom, darling, it's nothing really. Sarah just said she wanted to leave. I think she's just not comfortable here. The vibe isn't quite right." She trailed off delicately, leaving the rest to his imagination. The unspoken message was loud and clear. "Your sister doesn't fit in with our crowd." Tom's face crumpled with guilt and confusion. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to feel like this," he said, running a hand through his hair, making it stand up in stressed peaks. "Maybe you should take the kids back to the hotel. Let them rest. You must be tired from the drive." He was apologizing to me for Heather's behavior, and he had no idea. My brother, standing in the grand foyer of a mansion filled with crystal and marble and imported flowers, actually believed he lived here. Believed this was his home, his party, his life, He had no clue that every piece of furniture he lounged on, every room he entertained in, every inch of this partnership with Heather existed because Mark had been generous, a generosity that was about to end. Tom thought he was the host, the master of the house. In reality, he was a tenant whose lease was about to expire. "It's fine, Tom," I said quietly, slipping my arm around Ellie's shoulders. "We'll get out of your way." No, it's not like that," he stammered, flustered now, aware of the eyes on us all. "You came all this way. I wanted you to be here. Tom, sweetheart." Heather touched his arm, voice honeyed and sweet. "Let them go. Sarah clearly wants to leave, and we have guests to attend to. The Castlemores were asking about the investment timeline." She steered him away, redirecting his attention like she always did. Tom's shoulders sagged in defeat. He shot me one last apologetic look before allowing himself to be led back toward the center of the party, toward the lights, the laughter, the people who mattered in Heather's world. Mark was silent beside me, methodically helping Jamie into his jacket, but I saw it again, that tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth when Heather said, "My house." We moved toward the door, the crowd parting as if sensing the tide had turned. Everyone suddenly very interested in their shoes or their drinks or anything but meeting our eyes. At the doorway, Tom caught up to us, his face streaked with tears. "Mark, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were—" Mark paused, turning back. His hand rested firmly on Tom's shoulder, not unkindly, but with the weight of finality. "I know you didn't," Mark said quietly. "That was intentional." But then, his tone shifted, almost softer. "Tom, you need to understand something. Your value as a person has nothing to do with this address or that car or any of it." He let the words hang, heavy and true. "When you figure out where your true worth lies, when you can see it in yourself without needing these expensive props to prove it, then we'll talk. Really talk." But until then, Mark didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Outside, the cool night air hit my face like a fresh wave. I drew in a deep breath, the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Behind us, the mansion glowed with warm light. But it was deceptive. I could still feel the chill of judgment that had permeated every corner. Ellie's hand squeezed mine as we walked to the car. "Mom," she whispered, "are we leaving without saying goodbye?" "Sometimes," I said softly, "the best goodbye is just walking away with your head held high." Jamie was practically bouncing on his toes, the earlier gloom forgotten in the excitement of our dramatic exit. "Dad was so cool. Did you see Heather's face? She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon." "Jamie," I said, but there was no real reproach in my voice. Mark unlocked our trusty 7-year-old Subaru, the one with the dent in the rear bumper that I'd earned thanks to a misjudged garage wall, and we all climbed in. As Mark started the engine, I glanced back at the mansion one last time. Through the tall windows, I could see figures moving inside, guests gathering, no doubt dissecting everything that had just happened. Tom stood on the front steps, alone now. Heather was nowhere to be seen. "I almost feel bad for him," I murmured. "Don't," Mark said, pulling out onto the circular driveway. "This is the kindest thing I could do for him. He's been living in a fantasy, and fantasies always end. Better to end it now, on our terms, than to let him crash even harder later." We drove in silence for a few minutes, leaving Ashford's manicured perfection behind us. Then Ellie's small voice piped up from the back seat. "Daddy, are we richer than Heather?" I twisted in my seat to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was thoughtful, not proud or gloating, just trying to understand. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" she added, recalling the earlier jabs about our clothes. Mark caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and I saw that gentle smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "That's a good question, sweetheart," he said. "Here's the thing. Being rich isn't about showing off or making sure everyone knows how much money you have. It's definitely not about yelling at waiters or making people feel small." He paused at a red light, taking the moment to turn and look at both kids. "True wealth," he said slowly, "is having the power to protect your family and set things right without raising your voice. It's being secure enough in who you are that you don't need everyone else's approval." "Today," he continued, "I taught Heather a lesson in respect, something all her money and designer clothes can never buy her." "But she was so mean to you," Ellie said softly. "She called your jacket tragic." "She did," Mark agreed as the light turned green. "And you know what? It is a 10-year-old jacket from a small Vermont shop. The elbow patches are wearing thin, and it's probably not what anyone would call fashionable, but it's comfortable. It keeps me warm, and it reminds me who I really am beneath all the business suits and board meetings. Sometimes," he added with a wink, "the most expensive thing you can wear is authenticity." Jamie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "What's going to happen to Uncle Tom and Aunt Heather?" I considered the question carefully. They're going to have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, to build a life based on what they actually have, not on what they're pretending to have. "Will Uncle Tom be okay?" Ellie asked. "Eventually," I said, and I meant it. "Your uncle is smart and capable when he's not trying so hard to impress people. This might be the wake-up call he needs. As for Heather, I trailed off, uncertain. Mark finished quietly. She made her choices. We all do, I added, and then we live with them. The lights of Ashford faded behind us, giving way to darker roads, older trees, the authentic Connecticut that existed beyond the manufactured perfection of new money enclaves. Our headlights carved a path through the gathering darkness, leading us home, not to a mansion that required a trust fund to maintain, but to our farmhouse in Vermont, with its creaky floors, drafty windows, and garden where we grew real vegetables. Ellie yawned, her head drooping against Jamie's shoulder. In the rearview mirror, I watched my children settle into the comfortable silence of a car ride home, the night's drama already fading from their minds. They'd remember this evening, I knew, but not as trauma, as a lesson. Mark's fingers found mine across the center console, his calloused writer's hand intertwining with my own. We didn't say anything. We'd weathered the storm together, protected our children, and walked away with our dignity intact. We hadn't won because we had more money. We'd won because we knew who we were, and no amount of judgment from people living beyond their means could change that. The car carried us forward into the peaceful night, leaving behind the glittering facade of borrowed elegance, heading toward something real. But as we turned onto the narrow country road, a message flashed on Mark's phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. He looked up at me, eyes shadowed. "There's something else," he said quietly. And just like that, the night's quiet victory felt anything but certain. Mark's fingers tapped the screen with deliberate calm, but the tension in the car thickened like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. I watched him scroll through a series of messages and emails, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. Finally, he looked up, voice low and steady but carrying an unmistakable weight. "It's about Tom. And the house." My heart skipped a beat. "What about the house?" He hesitated, then slid the phone across the console toward me. The screen glowed with a formal letter, dated just yesterday, from a high-powered law firm in Hartford. The letter outlined the terms of Tom's lease on the mansion, the 10-page document I'd never seen before, filled with jargon and clauses that made my head spin. Mark's voice was quiet but sharp. "This is a notice of non-renewal. Tom's lease expires in 30 days. I blinked, stunned. "But the party tonight, the way he acted like he owned the place." Mark's jaw tightened. "He doesn't. None of it is his." I swallowed hard. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Tom's whole life here, the glittering parties, the expensive clothes, the social climbing, was built on borrowed time and borrowed money. Mark's eyes met mine, calm but fierce. "And the kicker? The lease was signed under a company name you wouldn't expect." I scrolled down to the fine print, my fingers trembling slightly. The parent company wasn't some anonymous real estate firm. It was Ironwood Holdings, the company Mark chaired. My breath caught. Mark's voice dropped even lower. 3 years ago, I approved a special exception for Tom. I froze his rent at a rate well below market value. I've been subsidizing this fantasy." I stared out the window, the dark trees blurring past. "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Because I wanted to see if he could make it on his own. I hoped this would be the push he needed." The silence in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jamie yawned from the back seat. "What's a lease?" Ellie looked between us, eyes wide. "Are we rich because of this?" I reached back and squeezed her hand. "Being rich means a lot of things," I said carefully, "but it's not about the house or the money. It's about who you are when no one's watching." Mark's gaze flickered back to the letter. "Tom's got 30 days to find somewhere else. That's not a threat. It's the truth." I swallowed hard. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Mark shrugged again, but there was steel in his voice. "He'll have to be. This isn't just about rent. It's about waking up, about facing reality." The road ahead was dark and winding, but for the first time in hours I felt a strange clarity settle over me. Whatever storm was coming next, we would face it together. But as the miles slipped away beneath the wheels, a question gnawed at me, one I couldn't shake. What else had Mark been keeping from me, and what secrets lay hidden in the shadows of that mansion, waiting to be uncovered? The next morning, sunlight poured softly through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. I stood by the sink, absent-mindedly washing the breakfast dishes, but my mind was miles away, still tangled in last night's revelations. Mark was already at the table, laptop open, fingers flying over the keys. His usual calm was tinged with something sharper, focused, almost predatory. I could tell he was digging deeper into the tangled web that was Tom's life in Ashford. Ellie and Jamie sat across from him, Ellie twirling a strand of her blonde hair, Jamie poking at his scrambled eggs with a distracted expression. "Mom," Ellie finally piped up, breaking the morning silence. "Why is Uncle Tom's house so important to Dad?" I hesitated, then smiled gently. "Sometimes family means helping people even when they don't know they need it." Mark looked up, eyes meeting mine. "And sometimes it means making tough decisions to protect the people you love." I nodded, but inside, a storm was brewing. There was more to this story, more to Tom's life than we'd seen at the party or in the lease documents. Mark closed his laptop with a snap. "I'm meeting with my legal team this afternoon. There are some irregularities I want to understand." "Like what?" I asked, leaning in. He hesitated. "There's a clause in the lease, something about charitable adjustments. It's unusual, even for a family exception." My eyebrows knitted in confusion. "Charitable adjustments? What does that mean?" "It means," Mark said slowly, "that the difference between market rent and what Tom's been paying has been covered by a family charity fund. In other words, Tom's lifestyle has been subsidized, not just by me, but by a whole network of interests." I swallowed hard. "So, the mansion, the parties, the cars, they've all been paid for by charity?" Mark nodded grimly. "Exactly. And that fund comes with strings attached." The kids were silent, absorbing the gravity of adult secrets. "Does Tom know?" I whispered. Mark's jaw tightened. "I don't think so. Or if he does, he's been pretending he doesn't." A sudden movement at the window caught my eye. Our old neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, was tending her rose bushes, humming softly. The peaceful morning outside was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside our kitchen. I glanced back at Mark. "What do we do now?" He reached across the table, taking my hand. "We protect our family, and we find out the truth." There was a knock at the door. Mark exchanged a quick glance with me before standing. I opened it to find a courier holding a thick envelope marked with the ironwood holding seal. "Delivery for Mr. Bennett," the courier said, handing it over with a polite nod. Mark took the envelope, eyes narrowing as he broke the seal. Inside was a stack of documents, financial statements, letters, and a single photograph. He flipped through the papers, then stopped dead. I leaned in to see. The photograph showed Tom, smiling broadly, arm draped around a man I didn't recognize, someone in a sharp suit with a cold, calculating gaze. Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. "This changes everything." The mystery deepened, and I knew, without a doubt, that the next chapter of this story would be far more dangerous than anything we'd faced so far. Mark's eyes flicked up from the photo, sharp and unreadable. "This man," he said slowly, "is Vincent Carlyle, a powerful figure in the city's financial world, one with a reputation for making deals that aren't exactly above board." I swallowed hard, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "What's he got to do with Tom?" Mark shook his head. "That's what we need to find out, but judging by these documents, Tom's been caught up in something much bigger than just a lease or a party." The house felt suddenly too quiet. Outside, the wind rustled the maple leaves, but inside, the weight of secrets pressed down. Ellie looked up, her blue eyes wide and serious beyond her years. "Is Uncle Tom in trouble?" I reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes people get in over their heads without realizing it." Jamie, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of toast, piped up, "Like when I tried to build a treehouse and it almost fell down." Mark smiled briefly. Exactly like that? I gave Jamie a quick wink, grateful for the brief moment of levity. But as Mark began to sift through the papers, I felt a chill settle over me. The neat lines of print hid tangled webs, loans, guarantees, and cryptic references to project funding and asset reallocation. It was clear someone was playing a long game, and Tom was caught in the middle. Mark's phone buzzed sharply, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "That's my lawyer." He stepped into the hallway to take the call, voice low and serious. I watched Ellie and Jamie, their innocent faces framed by the morning light. I wanted to shield them from this storm, but the truth was already creeping in. When Mark returned, his expression had darkened. "There's more. The lease agreement was just the tip of the iceberg. There's an internal directive from April 2020 authorizing a family charity adjustment that freezes Tom's rent indefinitely, regardless of market changes." He paused. "And it was signed by me." I blinked. "You signed it?" Mark nodded slowly. "I did, but I didn't realize the extent of the arrangement until now." My mind raced. "So you've been paying his way this whole time? But why keep it a secret?" Mark's gaze was steady. "Because I wanted to protect him. Because sometimes love means carrying burdens quietly." I swallowed. "But it's clear he's been living a lie." Mark's eyes hardened. "Yes. And that lie is about to come crashing down." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes like a warning. I looked at Mark, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. "No one said this would be easy," he murmured. "No," I agreed. "But we'll face it together." And as the first shadows of evening crept across the Vermont hills, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Because some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some debts demand a reckoning. That evening, the farmhouse felt both a sanctuary and a battleground. The cozy glow of the fireplace flickered against the walls, casting long shadows as Mark and I sat across from each other, documents strewn between us like battlefield reports. Our children were asleep upstairs, their steady breathing the only reminder of innocence untouched by the tangled web unfolding below. Mark ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "Vincent Carlyle isn't just some shadowy financier," he said quietly. "He's tied to several high-profile corporate takeovers, and not all of them clean. If Tom's involved with him, even unknowingly, it could mean serious trouble." I nodded, the weight settling in my chest. "Do you think Tom knows what he's gotten himself into?" Mark's eyes darkened. "I'm not sure, but tonight's party wasn't just about social climbing. It was a performance, a carefully crafted illusion to mask debts, obligations, and alliances. The room seemed to close in around us. I reached for Mark's hand, the comfort grounding me. Suddenly my phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number blinked ominously. "Be careful what you dig up. Some stones are better left unturned." I swallowed hard, showing Mark. He read it, his jaw tightening. "This just got personal." A knock at the door startled us both. Mark rose cautiously, opening it to find a courier holding an unmarked envelope. He took it, closing the door behind him. Inside, the envelope contained a single sheet of paper, a grainy photo of our farmhouse taken from a distance. Scrawled beneath it, "We're watching." My breath caught in my throat. Mark's voice was low but firm. "This wasn't just about Tom's lease. Someone wants us to back off." I felt a mix of fear and defiance. They thought we'd be intimidated. They underestimated us. Mark pulled me close, his eyes fierce. "We need to be ready, for whatever comes next." I nodded, heart pounding. "Together." As the night deepened, I stared out the window into the dark woods surrounding our home, shadows twisting like silent threats. Questions burned in my mind. Who was behind the warning? What did they want? And how far would they go to protect their secrets? The peaceful Vermont night had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same. The dawn broke over our farmhouse with a fragile light, casting pale gold across the worn wooden floors and the wild garden outside. But beneath the calm morning, a storm was brewing. one that would test everything we believed about family, loyalty, and survival. Mark sat at the kitchen table, fingers steepled, eyes sharp as he reviewed the latest documents. The layers of deceit were thicker than either of us imagined. Vincent Carlyle's reach stretched far beyond Tom's lease, entanglements in politics, offshore accounts, and shadow companies that blurred the lines between friend and foe. I poured 2 cups of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the silence. "What's our next move?" I asked. Mark looked up, a steely resolve in his gaze. "We expose the truth. But carefully. One wrong step, and this won't just be about a lease or a party. It could spiral into something dangerous." The kids were still asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the tightening web around us. I thought of Ellie and Jamie's wide, trusting eyes, and felt the fierce urgency to protect them, not just from outsiders, but from the secrets that threatened to unravel our world. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. "Trust no one. The house isn't the only thing at stake." A chill ran down my spine. Mark's voice was calm, but grave. "This is bigger than we thought. We need allies." I nodded, determination igniting inside me. "Then we find them." As we prepared to step into the unknown, a soft creak echoed from the hallway. We froze. The door to the living room was ajar, and standing there, framed by the morning light, was Tom. His face was pale and drawn, eyes dark with secrets and fear. "I think," he said quietly, "it's time we had a real conversation." The past was catching up, the future was uncertain, and the only thing clear was that nothing would ever be the same again. Our story was far from over,